record. Okay, so back real brief. We're talking notation. We're saying that we're not going to require it for this project, but it's a good skill to know. And I'm gonna show you guys a few tricks and some procedures. But my question to you was, what is the value of being able to read music? Because a lot of young people don't like to, even older people, they don't like to read music. They don't like that cumbersome nature of having to learn how to read music, first of all, even though once you get it down, it's pretty great. But what are some benefits of being able to read music and being able to look at a score and understand what's happening? Yes, Iggy, use your mic.
Hold
on.
Oh,
1 sec. Okay, go.
You can be exact in what you're reading. So let's say you hear something by ear and you play it. It's going to be close, but it's not going to be exactly what the composer wants.
It's a great, succinct answer. Ultimately, being able to read music, being able to understand a score, read a score is a big part of, you're not going to be, your ear isn't going to be correct all the time. Like Carl.
Theoretically, reading music, if you can get good at that, it's a lot faster because you don't have to then listen to the music first. You can just play it.
100% correct. That both of those answers are exactly the reason why we have sheet music. Sheet music is really, it's a score. It's just information. Think of it like you're reading the instructions in a cookbook or something, right? Well, you have to know how to read the language to cook, right? It's the exact same thing. It's just a different language, and so understanding it is so that you can get the information into your brain faster. You may think, oh, I learn by ear. I'm really good at learning by ear. Great, that's an important skill to have too. But if I give you a piece of music and I say, okay, I give one person a piece of music, one person a score, right? I don't let the person who sees the score even hear the music, right? I just give them to them. And then the person who's listening to it, who do you think is going to play it better, faster? Yes, Carl.
The person with the score.
The person with the score. And that's because they're just reading it down. The notes, the language that's right there. Whereas if the person who's listening, it may take them 10, 20, 50 listens to get everything down accurately. And like Iggy said, it may not be perfectly accurate. Their ears, like especially if it's a denser thing, they may not be able to hear what's that instrument doing. They have to listen to it back and forth a million times. Some crazy rhythm. It's hard to figure out. Is this a tuplet? What's going on? There's massive value. So if you ever get bogged down with it, just remember when you're trying to learn music, you're doing yourself a huge benefit. Okay, so there's a lot of benefits to using the Western notation system. There's other notation systems too, but that's just the one we all kind of know, right? It's the most popular one. And so why not understand how to record something in a DAW and have it translated to notation? Or even more, I think even more beneficial sometimes is writing it down in a notation software, composing it, and then bringing it into your DAW, right? You can do both. I'll tell you, writing the music out first and then bringing it into a DAW is much easier and cleaner than writing in the DAW and exporting it to a notation software. But you can do both, okay? So I'll show you some examples how this can be done. And feel free to just raise your hand. Let me know if you have questions along the way. I'm not going to give you based on time. This seriously could be a whole class for a whole semester at a university. Just doing this kind of stuff. So I'm going to give you a very quick, brief crash course on how this can work. Okay, let's share some screen, share some sound. Let's go here. Okay, down here. Open up. I don't know why it's being weird. Sometimes when I go onto Zoom, it does weird things to my computer. I don't get it. Like the other day when I was trying to show frame rates in Reaper, when I shared screen, it wouldn't let me see the frames. It was just doing by seconds. What? And then I turned off sharing and then you could do it. It's so strange. Go watch the video. I have proof. You can see. Okay, so I've got a file here. First of all, some of you, you can, if you just wanted to practice this before you even write music, you can go out and find a MIDI score and practice just like something that's already written, dropping it into your DAW. Okay, so you can do stuff like that. I'm going to start there. Okay, I've got this. So I went to a MuseScores website, and they have a massive database of MIDI music scored on like sheet music, right? And so you can actually see the Western notation, and you can export it as a MIDI file. It's pretty cool. And they're growing that library all the time. It's a great resource to have. And so you should check it out. Actually, I can just see here. It's like, you type in music XML. And the reason it's XML is a MIDI notation file format, right? So if you see .xml, that means you're exporting it or importing it, or that file can be dropped into a DAW or notation software to create the notation. It's a very common versus a MIDI file. There's a MIDI file and an XML file. XML file is like notation. MIDI file is just the sound, right? But you can turn, if you drop a MIDI file into your DAW, you can then export it as an XML file, okay? XML file is notation, MIDI file is the audio, but it's still just MIDI, so it's just information. It can be any instrument you want it to be, really, okay? So if you go to this Music XML website, this is actually Make Music, which they make Finale, actually. They have links to different websites where you can get music scores and whatnot, right? Many of you probably know IMSLP. IMSLP is this massive database of printed music, printed scores, full scores of like Beethoven, Bach. And the vast majority of it, I believe, is in the public domain, meaning 90 years after the composer died. So that's pretty much all the great classical composers up through, I believe Debussy's on there and some of those early 20th century ones. So musescore.com here, though, it'll take you to this link here where you can see search for sheet music, and there's tons. And you know, you can actually, there's actually a TV film one too, if you have video games. And this is where I actually went to find the Gusty Garden Galaxy XML file from Super Mario Galaxy, right? We were singing that the other night, right? And I found a piano version. There's a couple other versions on here too, but I found a piano version on here. Of course, you do have to start a account. There's a free trial one, and then it's like $2 a month. I just started a free trial with this one. I don't know. We'll test it out, see if I like it. You can find them at other sites without having to do that too. Okay, so I went there and I found some cool stuff. And then I got this file here, right? So if I double click on it right now, it's going to open up my default notation software, which is Finale. Whatever your default notation software is, it may be MuseScore, maybe Noteflight, there's a bunch.
Casey, we can't hear you.
There you go.
Okay. Hold on. I can fix that. It's gonna be tricky. I'm gonna try to fix this though. Everyone can hear me at the moment. Oh God. You see why this gets so complicated? You're sharing on Zoom. You're trying to come through these speakers in this classroom. You're trying to, and then Finale opens up and it just hijacks everything and changes all of your settings. Oh, I hate Finale sometimes. I hate Finale often, actually. That's why I'm probably going to switch to Dorico. Okay. Now let me go back to Zoom. Okay. Now you can turn yours off. I think we're probably good. But thank you, Carl. Saved the day. Sweet. Okay. Everyone online can hear me? Yes? Yes? Check, check.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So let's go back here. So it opened up Finale, and look at this beautiful score. It's not perfect because I mean, like, it's not the cleanest one because this was done by. This may not have been done by a professional engraver, which, by the way, an engraver is someone who actually finalizes the score for print. They're like the last person to touch a sheet of music before it goes out. And the engraver, this is probably not a professional engraver because I mean, if I were to print this right now, look at the word piano would get cut off, right? So it's not the prettiest, but it's okay. And I mean, look at this, like we've got words running into notes. Not cool, right? You print that, you're not even gonna see what note that is. It's like, what is that? So, you know, and then there's like dynamic markings covering up things, accents covering up things. Everything is like just a mess right there. By the way, dynamic markings, just a little notation tip. Dynamic markings should always come right before you want that dynamic to start. Don't put it directly under the note. Put it a little bit to the left of it, okay? It helps the reader see it a little bit sooner so that they know there's a dynamic change. When they're looking at the notes, they're not necessarily going to see the note and that at the exact same time. So give it to them a hair earlier. So move them all to the left of wherever that event starts, okay? Just a little bit. If you, by the way, if you ever have notation questions, that's one of my specialties. It's just notation. I have a little book, a little reference book, every notation rule like ever. It's great. Okay, so you can open up in Finale. So say you wrote this, say you did this, okay? And say now it's like, well, I would like to export this so that I can bring it into my DAW and make it a better recording, better sound. I can attach better sounds to it. Because face it, Finale's built-ins are terrible, right? Some of them are okay. And you can figure out how to use third-party samples with Finale. Finale and Sibelius, especially Finale, they're very buggy and glitchy. And whenever you're overloading them with things, unless you have a really great computer and, you know, you can run into a lot of trouble, okay? So I would export this. I would go, you know, file, and I would go to export, and Finale gives you a lot of options here. You could do a MIDI file, which is just the audio, or you can actually export as an XML, okay? And then it would create an XML file, and I'll show you. So I'm going to close this. And that's what this file is that I actually have, is music XML file. So now I want to open my DAW and drop that in. See what happens, right? Okay, so what's my DAW? Reaper. Should work with any of them. Logic, of course. Becca was having issues dropping in a simple audio file with Logic for some reason. It wasn't showing up. But most DAWs, it's drag and drop. Take a file, whatever, drag and drop it. See what happens. Okay, let me undock this. We don't need the video screen. Okay, so I'm literally going to go find that XML file. It's right here. I'm going to drag it into my track list. And then it's going to ask about it's usually almost every, now this is where it gets different from DAW to DAW, but it's going to give a dialog box asking about some parameters you want to set up, okay? And usually it's going to say tempo map 1:1. Okay, yeah, you want to keep it where it is. Now, for some reason, this particular file drops in, look at the BPM right here. I want to say it's like 394,736.84 blah, blah, blah beats per minute. I don't know why it did that. That is some weird thing with this particular XML file. That's not normal. Most XML files will drop in with the exact same tempo they were set to. This is some sort of, you know, again, when you're using MIDI scores that weren't done by professionals or engravers, you're going to probably deal with little things like this. So literally, I know that if I look back at the sheet music, it says 152 BPM. It's in 4/4. So I'm going to change it because if I were to keep it where it is, oops, hold on. Dang it. Let's drop this in again. Okay. So you can see it's basically less than a second. This is the entire score in less than a second. Ready? This is how I can I can say the alphabet in less than a second. It sounds like this. Hold on. I got to assign an instrument. Give me a second. Before I get to that, when you drop in an XML file, it may say piano. That's just the metadata from the file. There's no instrument attached to this music right now. It is literally just MIDI information. You have to assign a sound or an instrument to it. So I'm just going to do that real quick. I've got a whole bunch. Also, I'm going to put a piano to it because it was written for piano. So might as well try piano if this ever opens up. Not responding. Oh, I'm so glad that happens right now and never happens when I'm not doing this. Okay, let's go. Let's find a piano. I've got a whole bunch here. Let's do the Grandeur. Very fancy concert piano. Now just remember, when you're using third-party software, they have their own interface here to adjust things, the sounds, articulations, all that, right? Okay. So let's take a listen to this. I just played Gusty Garden Galaxy in a split second, the whole thing. Pretty great, right? Yeah. So obviously I was messing with this when I imported it the first time. I was like, what is happening? Why is this so tiny? And I finally looked down at the BPM. I was like, what is that number and where did it come from? Oh, so I know that the sheet music says 152, change to 152. Watch, it's going to get bigger, obviously. Here's the score now. Okay. I've assigned a piano to it. So let's take a listen. Bridge, E section. Love the octaves, you know? You gotta love the left-hand octaves. Just so driving. Okay, yay, good job. Thank you, thank you. Okay, so far we've imported some notation that we found, right? Or that we wrote potentially, right? Now, is this always, especially if you get it online, or even if you're just using your ear, always question every note, first of all, every pitch. There may be a couple wrong ones in there. I thought I noticed one or two that were like, I don't know if that's the right note. So, you know, accuracy is something you should always be questioning, especially if you get it off the internet. Because, you know, there's not really checks and balances for this stuff all the time. Couple other things. So what else about this is like, what can we do with this? You wrote this music, you want it to sound better. Right now, it just sounds kind of like a video game piano, right? Now it's a decent piano sound, but what's wrong with it? Like, what's kind of not natural or what's weird about it? Yeah, Carl. Hold on. I always got to do this. Otherwise we get that echo. And go ahead.
Well, first of all, Benji raised his hand first. But second of all, you can change the different parts of their different instruments or like add more on top of it.
Yeah, right. Can you say that again a little bit louder?
Yes, I can.
Maybe you can.
Maybe. You can change the different parts so that they're different instruments. And add more to the music.
Sure. Just like if you've ever orchestrated a piece from a piano part, which is actually a really fun practice, really, for arranging practice and orchestration. Go find a piano piece and orchestrate it for like a larger group, right? Or arrange it for a larger group. And yeah, and so I feel like, yeah, that's a possibility. Certainly, we have some arrangement orchestration options here. Iggy, did you have something?
Yeah, something that might help. There's two things that I thought of.
Okay.
One is changing the intensity of the notes. So maybe like, because that can like make it softer or louder.
Okay.
So I think that would help smooth things out.
Yep.
And like just fine tuning that, and also adding reverb might help to make it more natural.
Exactly. And then there's one other thing that's I haven't heard yet. And what I would say is articulations. We saw articulations in the sheet music in the XML file, but we're not hearing it here. And a lot of it's because, well, when you set up an instrument to one track, you can only set sometimes only one articulation at a time. Okay, so let me show you something here real quick. I'll keep my speaker off. I'm going to open up a new project tab, and I'm going to open up. So what you can do, I do have it. Okay, what you can do is you can create templates, an orchestral template, right? So that, because when you're working with MIDI libraries, they only do one articulation usually at a time. You can map them out separately and then record it that way. But if you want to change existing notes too, you have to set up a track for long sustains. You have to set up a track for staccatos, for tenutos, etc. Right? You have to set up tracks that handle these things. Accents you don't have to, because that can be done with the velocity changes like Iggy was mentioning. But you can create a template. And I've created several. Right? Here's a full orchestra template. Let's see if it's. I want to go here. Project template, full orchestra. Let's see if this is the correct one. Give it a second. Okay. Go to view. We don't need to see the mixer. Here is a template that I made and I keep and I use. Now this is if I want to write something for a full orchestra, right? And so you see I've color coded the sections as well. So strings, but look at how it says strings: long, spiccato, pizzicato, low octaves long, low octaves short for the lower strings. I could go specifically and say cellos, basses, or whatever. Don't worry about these tracks. These are just auxiliary tracks. They have a purpose. I don't need to explain that now. Woodwinds, okay, high, long, high, short. Right? So the upper woodwinds doing longer sustains, the lower woodwinds doing staccatos or pizzicatos, or not pizzicatos, that's not a thing on woodwinds, but it's more staccato type of figures, okay? And then if you wanted so there's 4 articulation types, right? There's 4 main articulation types: tenuto, staccato, accent, and marcato, okay? So a tenuto is play the note long, give it its full value, no accent. Accent is play the note full value, just like a tenuto, but accent it, right? So give it a little bit more. Staccato is play the note short. Marcato is play the note short, but accented, right? Those are the 4 main articulations in music. And the 2 accented ones you can adjust by just adjusting velocity, whereas the length ones, that might have to be done by setting up a separate track with different articulations, okay? It can be tricky. And this is tedious work, which is another reason why it's going to be difficult to get this done in 2 days for some of you. But yeah, so like same with the brass: long, short, low, long, short, low, short, short, nasty. I found this really cool one that I like to use. It's kind of more of a growly sound, it's more of an effect. Mid, long, mid, short, etc. And then there's percussion. I just put in a bunch of different percussion things. You know what I mean? You can set up an orchestral template for like specifically for film scoring. This one's kind of designed for that, but I could, things that instruments I like to use when I'm scoring for film or whatever. Why not be able to just open the template and it's all ready to go, right? And you don't have to use all these instruments either. You can, remove some, but so there's an example of, let's see, what did Carl say? Give your dot a hat and it gets louder. Oh yeah. Oh. So back here, so like I said, create yourself a template. It's going to save you a lot of time. Whatever DAW you're using, they all do it. They all, in orchestral templates, learn how to map things. We just don't have time this week. I'm sorry. Maybe someday. Maybe if you come study with me at UW River Falls, I can teach you that. But okay, so back to this now. So like we were saying, like it just doesn't sound great. What if I just, first of all, what's one of the first thing I could do is let's just try changing the instrument. Okay, because it's just MIDI. We can change, we can put it whatever we want. We can make whatever sound we want. How about we try some strings? Okay, I'm just gonna try some strings here with my Albion 1 string section. Oh, don't be slow. My desktop in my office is 1,000 times faster than this. So while that's loading, so you can change an instrument out of any MIDI event. It doesn't matter, as long as it's within the range of that instrument. Okay, that's an important thing. You can't just give a flute a tuba part, like just drag and drop the MIDI into a flute part that was written in a tuba below the bass clef, right? Because you're not going to hear anything. It's just not going to play. Because sample libraries do adhere to, especially orchestral acoustic instrument sample libraries, they adhere to range. Synths do not. Okay, you put in a synth, you can go as high as you want, as low as you want, until the human ear can't hear it anymore. The frequency range is infinite, but we can only hear from, what is it, minus however many hertz, 50, 200, up to like into the kilohertz, 200 something. It gets to a point where we can't hear it. That's like a dog whistle, right? We can't hear a dog whistle because of the frequency it's in. It's not, our human ears don't perceive it. Okay, so let's listen to it with some strings instead. Let's see how this sounds. Hold on, got to turn up the speaker. Hold on, let me get the speaker up. Okay, here we go. This is a pretty nice string library. So. Okay, what's the articulation? Pizzicato, right? When they pluck the string, it's pizzicato, right? So if I go into my string library, that particular one, because here's where, you know, the articulation is set. Yeah, it's set to pizzicato right now. So that every single note is going to be pizzicato. That could be for like maybe a section, but probably not the whole piece, right? It's a little strange. It gets a little too much after a while. You kind of want some sustains. But then I could do all sustains. Okay, and let's listen to that then. I think that's better. It's still a little too, now it's a little too legato for me. It's everything's so connected, you know, and so like there's another thing that we'd want to pay attention to and probably adjust. Okay, so maybe we try some different articulations. Okay, I'll you know, another thing we can do is go into the editor, your MIDI editor. First of all, you see these down here. These are for every note. It's got a velocity level. Okay, so like Iggy said, there's like no dynamics at all. And that's because every note is the exact same velocity. Look at this flat line, right? So here's where we might want to adjust it. We can automate it too. We can actually set it up so we have it on a fader and play it, and then we can move it up and down or with our mouse, and we can like adjust it as we go. That's called automation, right? And it will record that. Then we'll have some variety. So you're going to want to automate the velocities. You may have to manually go in and touch one and mess with one too. But because they're all in this particular library, I can't separate the articulations. I could if it's complicated, but I'll just show you another way to do it. So I'm going to open up one that I did. Let's see here. Let's open up. I sort of attempted to separate it today. This exact same one. what did I do? I call it Gusty Garden strings. So I took the strings, let's open it here. I took this part to the point we're at, and then I separated the notes that were in certain octaves from the notes that were in the lower octaves, right? And then I adjusted the articulation. So the low strings are going to have pizzicato right now, and the upper strings are going to have just tenuto. Okay, let's just make sure that's all set right. Yep, so they're on long. So now let's hear a combination. Again, this is not where I'm going to want it all exactly either, because I don't want every bass note to be short, and I don't want every upper note to be long. There's going to be a mix. So you may have to make some adjustments. It can get complicated, okay? But let's hear it. I think it's better than where we started, certainly. But we're getting there, right? So again, the nuance, the minutia, it's gonna weigh on you, okay? And so you have to be patient with this stuff, but you got to get it right. You got to get it how you want it. And just transferring it from an XML file will not transfer the articulations a lot of times. Okay, but let's go back to this piano one, and let's do the opposite. Okay, so let's open up the MIDI editor. Now, most programs, Logic does this, most of the DAWs now have a built-in notation software program. Is it as comprehensive as like even Finale, Sibelius, Dorico, even MuseScore? Not really, okay? You can certainly make a score in your DAW. Oops, what was that? That was a very loud thing. Let me just turn down my speaker for a sec. Okay. Let me know if someone's trying to talk. So you can take a score from your DAW and print it right there too, without even having to go to notation software. In fact, when I go into Reaper, see this treble clef? Okay. It's just going from the piano roll, which this is called the piano roll. When you're in a MIDI editor, you're seeing the piano, you're seeing the notes where they are in time and in pitch. Okay, so higher, lower pitch, left, right in time, and then length as well. But I'm going to go here because I like this, you know? I like to see this too. I like to see them both. Now, this looks exactly pretty much, you know, like Reaper interpreted exactly how it came, as we saw it before. In fact, it actually looks cleaner a little bit, right? Than the XML file that we originally looked at. And you can actually listen to it from in here too. Okay, so just like you can, let me turn on my speaker again. Hold on. So we can hear it in class here too. Okay. Okay, and remember, we're still in that one articulation. So I'll change it to pits once. Okay, what a great melody. By the way, I have a video. There's this guy, a YouTuber. It's called 8-Bit Music Theory, right? He does a whole video on why this is one of the greatest melodies of all time. He calls it why this is a perfect melody for Super Mario's Gusty Garden Galaxy. He makes a really strong argument, and it's great. He breaks it down every note, every little phrase. It's incredible, and he does a very good job. From my standpoint, as a theory professor, he does a very good job of covering his bases. But now, so I could literally just go ahead and export this as a notation file, like a PDF, right? So in Reaper, you can just export. And right now I'm going to choose, let's just do PDF, right? Call it Gusty Garden Galaxy, GGG. Put it on my desktop. Okay. Let's get through all these windows. Oh my goodness. GGG, there it is. Look up the PDF. And there it is. Is it engraved well? No. This is why you'd want to drop it into a notation software, because look at this. We've got expression markings, overlapping stems, and rests. There's rests that are up above and below because they didn't hide them in the XML. So when you're in Finale or whatever, and you're using multiple layers, because if you're on one staff and you want to have different voices doing different things independently, you have to create, there has to be a separate layer. Otherwise you can't do it. It won't let you do it. It'll overwrite the current layer you're in. So when you do multiple layers, rests will appear by default. You have to hide those, right? They didn't hide this on this one, this XML. So another reason why you can go in, you can actually hide those in your DAW as well. At Reaper you can, but look, it's 2 measures per system. That's, if it was like all 30-second notes, I'd be like, okay, 2 measures per system. Yeah, because it spreads out. Anyways, it crunches them all in together. If you have like 8 measures per system, can't see it. 2 measures per system is a little aggressive here. I would probably put at least 4 measures per system. You know what I mean when I say measures per system? Okay, you see there's 2, and then there's the next system. The next line down is a system. So we would probably want at least 4. And try to stick to even numbers when you're doing that stuff, by the way. Okay, so back to Reaper. So that's one option. The other thing we can do is we can, just like we started, we can export as an XML file. Okay, so you just want to choose the type. And again, then it'll create that thing we started with that we first dropped in here. Okay, so writing your score, whether you do it in notation software or whether you do it in your DAW, you can go back and forth. And typically, if it's something that you're handing off to in a professional setting or for a job, or that you got paid to do, you're probably going to want to drop it into a professional notation software, or at least a dedicated notation software, not like a DAW where the notation is sort of a, oh, we also do this, because they won't have as many bells and whistles. They won't have all the resources you need to engrave it properly. Okay, so make sure that you're able to use both. So I'd like you to practice this. Okay. Hey, go find the Gusty Garden Galaxy. Go find a video game MIDI score somewhere, or just the score, MIDI score. There's millions of them. Drop them into your DAW. Export it, or first of all, then adjust how you want to sound, the articulations. Literally, if you want, it's going to be tedious, but you separate them by articulation, by instrument. That like that one I made, I could change the lower instrument, have it be tubas or something. Like that range is good for maybe a trombone, euphonium potentially, and then go with that sound, right? So, any questions on this? Obviously, there's so much more we can talk about. There's so many more details involved with this process. I wanted to give you the broad strokes. This, like I said, this is a whole semester class of doing this stuff, and we're trying to give it to you in 40 minutes, 45 minutes. Yes, Carl.
Is there
Hold on. Go ahead.
Is there a way to export, like in Reaper, when you have multiple different lines, is there a way to export them?
Yes. So if you wrote something in a notation software and it's got multiple instruments, when you open that, when you import that into your DAW, it'll say create 3 tracks, create 1 track. You can put them all into one, separate them. A dialog box will come up and ask you that. Same with if you make it multiple tracks in your DAW, like Reaper, and you bring it into Finale, it's going to ask you, it's going to give a dialog box. It's going to say, how many tracks do you want and how do you want to label them? There's a whole bunch of details that you're going to want to do, like quantization things. It's going to ask a lot of different things that you're going to want to go through very carefully. And then you press OK, and then boom, it shows up with it separated out.
You only showed us how to export single tracks, though.
Right. So we're out of time, unfortunately. But I will show you it maybe on your one-on-one if we have time. I'll show you how to export multiple tracks at the same time and show you all, because the getting into the weeds of those dialog boxes that come up when you're doing that, because it wants every detail, it'd be a little overwhelming and tedious. So, okay, well, I think Jordan's class will be starting here pretty soon, so I'll just end it there. Again, if you have questions, you can always come find me. You can always email me, even when camp's over. Okay, if you have questions about this stuff, send me an email. I'm happy to respond to you. No problem, anytime. You should all have my email by now too. So, okay, and I'll stop sharing, and that will end this session. Thank you very much.